This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to give you a list of 9 daily driver cars that will stop a car show. So these are 9 cars that you can drive every day, that you can take your kids in, that are practical, reasonable, rational cars, but they are so cool and exciting that people will freak out when they see them at a car show. That's a hard thing to combine. It's easy to get a sports car that will stop a car show, that everybody's like, whoa, this is so cool. And it's easy to get a practical car that nobody pays attention to at a car show. But to combine the two in one is hard, but I've figured out 9 daily driver cars that will stop everybody in their tracks at a car show. Let's do it.
Buying gas or grabbing a bite to eat? You're already spending money, so why not earn real cash back every time? That's exactly what I do with Upside, and honestly, it's the most valuable app I've got on my phone right now. I use it all the time, especially at my go-to gas station just around the corner and every time I grab Chipotle. I open the app, I claim an offer, I pay as usual with my card, and the cash back just shows up in my account. It's that simple. No confusing rewards, no points to convert, just real money that you can transfer to your bank, PayPal, or even gift cards. It works at over 100,000 gas stations, restaurants, and grocery stores across the country, so chances are you're already near a place that's on the app. People are earning up to 3 times more cash back with Upside compared to credit card rewards or store loyalty programs, and Upside users are making as much as $280 a year. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside and use code DOUG to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Or scan the QR code here to claim this offer. How cool is that? I've been using it for months now. It's just easy money on stuff I was already going to buy. If you're not using Upside, you're missing out.
Okay, 9 daily drivers that will stop a car show. Now, I want to be clear about this. These are daily driver cars. They are not necessarily affordable cars. This is not 9 cheap cars that you can drive every day to stop a car show. Some of them are cheap, but other ones are very, very, very expensive, but they're still daily drivable and you can stop a car show. And on that subject, let's talk about my first one, probably the most expensive car on this list. It's kind of a multi-selection, the Subaru Impreza 22B and the R34 Nissan Skyline GT-R. Okay, so both of these cars are expensive. A nice R34 GT-R is now $125,000 to $175,000 car. A 22B is even more than that. Nice ones sell for like $250,000. But I've spent considerable time in both of these cars. I've driven 2 different 22Bs and 2 different R34 GT-Rs, and I can say unequivocally that both cars would be pretty easy to daily drive if you wanted to. The 22B is like the ultimate 90s Impreza. It was like the craziest one. And of course, the R34 was the ultimate iteration of the Skyline GT-R that lasted throughout the 80s and 90s. But as vaunted and amazing as they are, and as much as people freak out about them at car shows, they're pretty usable. They're pretty usable cars. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine. He was like, you would never daily a 22B. Do you know how valuable it is? Yeah, it is. But you can daily it. Like, it's an Impreza. Like, you fit just fine. It's reliable. You can pretty much park it anywhere. No one is going to say, oh my God, it's 22B. And you're not going to get, I mean, you have no greater damage risk in that car than other vehicles. It is a pretty usable car. And same is true for the R34. So they are crazy cars, but they really are daily drivable if you have a pretty big budget. But they're reliable, they're comfortable, they're usable. Those cars are daily drivers that will stop a car show. Okay, next up, daily drivers that'll stop a car show. Next one is the Toyota Century with a V12. For those of you who don't know, the Toyota Century is this ultra luxury, sort of Rolls-Royce-like vehicle that's sold only in Japan, and it's primarily aimed at like Japanese politicians or business people who don't want to buy a foreign car because there's a car industry in Japan. So they want to buy like a nice luxury car, but they also want to buy Japanese, and a Toyota Avalon won't do for a high-level CEO, plus that's not even sold in Japan. So Toyota makes a car called the Century, which is aimed squarely at this type of person, like a Japanese business leader or politician who wants to drive Japanese. A lot of enthusiasts know about this car. The cool thing is that the second generation Toyota Century, which was sold from like 97 until a few years ago, was sold with a V12. It was a Toyota V12. The intent was to make it like as smooth and luxurious as possible, and Toyota developed a V12 that apparently did that, at least in their estimation. And so the Toyota Century V12 V12s off for a long time. So you pull up at a Cars and obviously it's daily drivable. It's daily driven frequently in Japan, and actually used Centuries from that era in 97, 98, they're legal to import because they're 25 years old, and they're coming in pretty regularly now. We sell a lot of them on Cars and Bids for not that much money. 15, 20 grand buys you a really nice V12 Century. And they're just smooth, competent, wonderful luxury cars. And you pull up at a Cars and Coffee, everybody knows, oh, that's a cool car. Some people won't know what it is, so they'll turn their heads. Some people will know what it is and they'll turn their heads, but everybody will be surprised when they see a V12 powered Toyota. And so, especially for reasonable money, that is a head-turning car for a Cars and Coffee that is definitely daily drivable. Okay, next one. Here's one that's going to surprise people. The Maserati Quattroporte, but not the one you know about, the 4th gen Maserati Quattroporte, which was sold throughout the 1990s and never sold here in North America. This is the 4th gen Quattroporte, and it is a car that most Americans don't even know exists. I have lost count of the number of times I've heard of people refer to the car that came after this, the 05 Quattroporte, which was sold in America. I've heard people refer to this as the 1st generation Quattroporte. In fact, that was the 5th generation Quattroporte, and previous models, some of them had been sold in the US, but the 4th generation had decidedly not been sold in the States. And it's actually a pretty striking looking car. It was designed by Marcello Gandini, the same person who did the Countach. And it has that famous Gandini wheel arch in the back that isn't a real circle, but instead has this sort of diagonal cut. And it's very unusual. And a lot of people know about the Maserati Biturbo, which was a two-door car, and there was a convertible version of that. And a lot of people know those kinds of 80s Maseratis. But most people don't realize there was a Quattroporte in the 90s and that it wasn't sold here in the States. A totally crazy, very unusual car. And if you notice it, you will turn your head and think, what is this 90s car that I don't know about? Oh, it's a Maserati. Wait, what? And it'll really surprise people. The 4th generation Maserati Quattroporte, definitely an unusual, bizarre, interesting car. It was sold from 94 to 01, and so basically all of them are legal to import to the US. There's a few out here, and they are all unusual. Okay, next up, daily driver cars that will stop a Cars and Coffee. Here's another kind of pair that are basically the same idea. The original Audi A2 and the original Fiat Multipla. Now, this would only be a Cars and Coffee here in North America, but the Audi A2 and the Fiat Multipla, when they first came out in the late 90s, had such radically ridiculous and crazy designs that they would absolutely turn everybody's head if you brought one to a Cars and Coffee in the United States. The Multipla, of course, was famous for looking like a platypus. It had those weird lights under its windshield. It made no sense, and in fact, the interior was even more unusual. On the Audi A2 side, it has a familiar Audi look to it, but it's like a tall, small hatchback. That would confuse a lot of Americans. Now, these are obviously daily driver cars. In fact, they are frequently being daily driven in Europe even to this day, and other places. You see A2s and Multiplas in Mexico, Latin America. But it would be a very unusual sight at a North American Cars and Coffee. And so for not that much money, you could buy a fairly tame daily drivable car that is also absolutely nuts and would absolutely turn everybody's head and make everybody go, what is that thing at a Cars and Coffee? Okay, next up, here is a fantastic one that not a lot of people know about and would definitely turn heads at a Cars and Coffee. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. You're thinking, I know that car. The Lancer Evolution 9 station wagon. A lot of people don't realize, but Mitsubishi had a factory-built Evo wagon. And I believe it was only on the Evo 9 generation. So that was the one like in 2008, 2009-ish, when just before they went to the Evo 10 that kind of ended the run. The Evo 9 wagon is a very unusual car. Virtually nobody knows it exists, but in fact it did exist. And the real thing that messes with your mind is you see the car and you see the front end from an Evo and it just looks like a normal Evo, but then the rear is a wagon and you're thinking, did this person convert this car? What is this thing? How did they get this? How did they make this happen? The answer is they made it. Mitsubishi actually made this from the factory with a manual transmission and the same turbo 4-cylinder engine and all-wheel drive system that was in all the other Evo models. This was a real legitimate Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, but it was a station wagon version. And in the world where car enthusiasts enthusiasts are largely obsessed with station wagons and like that practicality and the cool factor, that would be a very, very special, interesting, exciting, unusual car, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo Wagon. Now, this isn't legal to import to the US yet. Evo IX Wagon was actually sold 05 to 07 era, so they're like 17, 18 to 20 years old. So they're 5 years away from being legal in the States. But when they do become legal, you buy one of those, bring it to a Cars and Coffee, everybody will turn heads. And it's daily drivable. I mean, a regular Evo is daily drivable, and this one just adds even more practicality. So an Evo Wagon would be really, really, really crazy. Apparently, Mitsubishi made around 3,000 of these Evo Wagons. They said they were going to make 2,500, and apparently they made just under 3,000 in the end. That actually is a pretty reasonable number in order to be able to find one. Like, they're going to be out there. When you want to bring one over and import one, this is going to be a pretty cool car to import in a few years, and it will definitely stop Cars and Coffee where people don't really know that it exists. Okay, next up on the list of daily drivers that'll stop a Cars and Coffee, how about the Pontiac Aztek with the roof tent? If you go to a Cars and Coffee and set up your Pontiac Aztek and set up the tent, which I just realized should have been called the Az tent, if you do that, people will freak out. The Aztek is a car that has always been both scorned and also beloved among car enthusiasts. Like, it's so ridiculous and stupid and absurd that we had to appreciate it, and ugly and weird. Like, we had to love it. And so a lot of people do. It's like a pretty crazy but absurd but kind of fun car, right? But then there was a a factory, but it was an accessory. They didn't sell it with the cars. You bought it through your dealership. Tent that you could actually set up and hook up on your Aztek, and you could camp there using your Aztek as a camping vehicle. And if you set up your Aztek tent at a Cars and Coffee, as I once did in a video when I filmed my review of the Aztek years and years ago, I set it up with the owner of the car in a middle school parking lot in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. If that's you, you will find an enormous amount of people flocking to your Aztek. And Aztek in general is cool and crazy. Aztek with tent is even more insane. And of course, it is a daily drivable vehicle. It was made to be a fairly drivable, usable car. But the Pontiac Aztek set up with a tent is definitely a car that stops the Cars and Coffee. Aztek bed. Okay, next one on this list, daily drivers that will stop a car show. Undoubtedly, another good one, the Maybach 62. So when they reinvented the Maybach brand, when Mercedes-Benz did in the mid-2000s, to compete with Rolls-Royce and others, Bentley, the original Maybach vehicles were like bespoke. Even though they looked like S-classes, they were completely bespoke cars that shared basically nothing with the S-class. And there were two versions, and originally they called them the Type 57 and the Type 62, and this referred to either their wheelbase or their length in meters, 5.7 and 6.2. The 57s are pretty cool, but the 62 it essentially looked like a limo. When you see it in pictures, it just looks like a long S-class, but in person it was taller, wider, physically larger, like it looked like a much more severe and serious car. That car to this day turns heads, and it turns my head when I see them on the road, even though they're pretty subtle. Now, it's a very daily drivable car, very comfortable, very luxurious, actually a pretty impressive vehicle, but it would really have an impact at a car show where you don't see a lot of like older luxury cars like that, but also you don't see a lot of those Maybachs. They were not particularly popular cars. They did not sell particularly well, so much so that Mercedes stopped making vehicles like that and folded the Maybach brand into the regular Mercedes brand to use as like a luxury trim level of its normal models. And those Maybach sedans are very head-turning when you actually see one on the street. In pictures, again, they always have looked like S-classes, but in practice, they really, really, really looked like a very serious, crazy luxury car. And that was especially true of the 62, which was the big, long one, and it looked big and long. And when you saw one go by, you were like, this is something different. And I think at a car show would always have been pretty impressed with the Maybach, but particularly now, they've scattered. You never see them on the road anymore. Not that you really did then. They are very, very hard to find. And I think that would be a very, very special car to bring to a car show. And I think people would be like, what was this all about? I've heard of these. I haven't seen one of these in years. Like, what is the deal with this thing? And I think it would really turn heads. And on the subject of luxury cars that would turn heads, daily drivers that would stop a car show, obviously the original Aston Martin Lagonda, the one that was sold from the 70s into the early 90s, one of the craziest craziest looking cars of all time, but it was also a sedan that could be fairly reasonably daily driven if you had a pretty big maintenance budget or you were a very skilled or ambitious mechanic. The original Aston Lagonda really was like a crazy car. It was Aston's attempt to make like a luxury sedan to compete with some of the craziest luxury sedans. You know, Aston was already making these very special sports cars. They figured, why not also go after Bentley and Rolls-Royce and that kind of stuff? And so they tried to with the original Lagonda, and it was obviously absurd. I mean, it's a totally insane looking, feeling car, and I've driven it, and everything about it is crazy. Like the CRT screens for the gauge cluster and the odometer under the hood, everything about the original Lagonda is crazy. And then you have the fact that it looks like an anteater to really drive home the point of insanity of that car. Everything about it is crazy. It is a really special and insane car, and everybody agrees that it is one of the quirkiest, most interesting looking, most bizarre cars ever manufactured. And I have absolutely no doubt that this car would stop a car show, possibly more than any other vehicle on this list. I think people would be like, oh my God, an Aston Martin Lagonda. Someone's actually driving one. Someone's out there got one. That is an amazing thing. And I think that would be like a really special car and a relatively okay daily driver when it was running. I've always kind of wanted one myself. I'm afraid to go down that road and actually buy one and own it, but they are so cool and so crazy looking, and they've developed a reputation of being incredibly quirky. I think in part due to my video. When I reviewed one a long time ago, one of my very favorite videos I have ever done, ever, at any point, it's now at 6.8 million views, all these people who saw the crazy Aston Martin Lagonda and how insane it really is. Love that car, love how head-turning it is. And finally, our last car on the list of daily drivers that would stop a car show, the Dodge Dakota Convertible. Yes, made in the late 80s, early 90s, Dodge created a convertible version of its Dakota pickup truck. And if you showed up at a car show with your Dodge Dakota, and it had a soft top that you put down, like as you parked, that would be a pretty crazy head-turning thing. To this day, I still get people occasionally send me a message being like, I just saw this convertible truck that someone converted. And I'm like, was it a Dodge Dakota? And they're like, yeah, well, actually, that was not a conversion. That is a real thing, Dodge Dakota Convertible. This wouldn't necessarily turn everybody's head. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily notice this car, but if you did, you'd be thinking one of two things. Number one, either, what is that? Did that person make it themselves? What is that ridiculous vehicle? Or two, oh my God, I can't believe someone is actually out there driving a Dodge Dakota Convertible. Holy crap, this is amazing. Regardless, you would turn your head and watch because you were never going to see another soft top convertible pickup truck go by. And especially one from the 80s when they didn't make weird stuff like that. Not that they did at any other point except for the Chevy SSR. It was a ridiculous and insane vehicle, and it is definitely head turning. And I think even now, even more now, as like the general knowledge that it exists has kind of dissipated, I think people would be even more surprised to see a convertible version of the Dodge Dakota driving around at a car show. So there you go. Those are my daily drivers that would turn everybody's head and stop a car show. It is hard to imagine a daily driver car that could also attract that much attention, but there are some of them. Those are 9 of my favorite daily driver choices that would stop a car show. Let me know some more below. I was trying to brainstorm these with Filippo and a couple other people at the Cars and Bids office, and this is what we came up with. My daily driver list that would stop a car show. Can't wait for an Evo wagon to show up and make everybody wonder what's going on.